good. Happy New Year, everybody. We have a nice crowd here today. I see 39 registered. All right, woohoo. And I am going to start with, I'm going to try to show you the cover. Okay. So for those of you who maybe read it on the Kindle, I want you to, it's really a little difficult, but you see that there are three flowers in pretty full bloom. And then there's a little stem here, all right, looking like it's ready to bloom, blossom, and that is the latecomer. What you might not be able to see clearly, is that these flowers are resting in these little test tubes. They're not your typical bud vases. They look like bud vases from far away. There we go. They look like bud vases, but they are test tubes. And of course, that sets the background for the Oppenheimer triplets, which, as we find out early on, nobody ever talks about them as the Oppenheimer triplets. They talk about them as the weird one, the what do they call the other guy? I forgot already. The weird one, the girl, and the smart one. And so they get their labels practically in the petri dish. And then we get to follow these young people as they leave their home, go off to college, and as they're leaving, in comes the latecomer, number 4, Miss Phoebe. Okay, so before I go on, because this book has a lot to unpack, and I'm really thrilled that you chose it as our discussion. We're up to 47 people here, so this is great. So I would like to hear from you. Again, I always begin by inviting questions and comments, observations, and complaints, because we always have a couple of complaints, and that's what makes the discussion interesting. So let me take a few volunteers that want to comment on your experience with the latecomer. Okay, Jen, you're
And
up
then I
first.
see Barbara and Diane. Yeah, I see.
Okay, we'll
So
get
When I
everybody in.
first started reading it, I didn't know where it was going. Like it was about, an accident that the father had, and then the kids hated each other, and I was so sad that they hated each other. They were at school together. I didn't understand. And then obviously what happened when she had this fourth baby, and it opened my eyes up. I kept on saying to myself, like, I know somebody who has a 7-year-old and who has a frozen egg. Like, what would the dynamics be of those two children? Or if she would have switched the eggs when she had the eggs at the time,
Exactly.
what would have happened? Would the kids have liked each other more?
Right.
It really makes you think, because science does this every day with people.
Absolutely.
And it's very intense on your brain to sit and think that this could change a whole family, what a doctor is doing.
Absolutely. And it's the doctors, it's the medical profession, it is science. And especially in this day and age when many young women who are choosing to either stay single longer or not get into a serious relationship until possibly now their 30s, sometimes even their late 30s. And one of the things that's always in the back of many young women's minds is that biological clock is ticking. But now we have so many different alternatives. As you mentioned, Jen, young women can freeze their eggs, and they do. We also have different ways and different definitions of family. So we have same-sex parents, 2 women, even 2 men who can have surrogate mothers. I mean, it gets really, this parenting business gets, it opens up. We have many, many more possibilities, but we also have many, many more complications that go with, that's part and parcel of these decisions to have a child, the same way that the Oppenheimer triplets were conceived. So yes, Jen, we're going to get to some of those, what I call those essential questions. Okay.
Yeah, I saw Barbara King, then Diane, I see Berna and Jill. So Barbara, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was very unusual that you would have three people raised together, you know, born on the same day and raised together and dislike one another so much. I can understand having three different personalities, but the fact that they disliked one another and avoided one another, couldn't even visit one another when they were in the same college, I found that increasingly difficult to believe. And then in the very last chapter, when they're 36, I think at their 36th birthday, they decide that they really are bonded and really do love one another. And that came as a big surprise. And so I wasn't quite certain that I believed that. And then the other thing was, you have the story of Eli Stone, who
Yeah.
you find out at the very end is a white man who changed his color so he could be black. I thought that was, I wasn't quite certain I believed that. And then after you find that out, he's kind of dropped from the book. I wanted to hear, as soon as I found out that interesting thing about him, I wanted to know more about him. And then he just wasn't mentioned anymore. So I liked the book, but there were some things about it I just really didn't believe as well.
I hear you loud and clear. And I think that many people have had that response. Like, how could these three siblings, literally that started out in the same place and for 19 years shared a home, how could they not like each other? The quick answer to that, and we're going to delve into it, the quick answer, I think from my perspective, is there were too many secrets in that family. The mother and father, I think, were so preoccupied with their own agendas and their own mishigash, if you will, right? With their own issues, their own burdens, that it seemed to me that even though the mother, Johanna, tried very hard to give the children what they needed, she kind of falls short. She doesn't give them what they need. She gives them birthday parties. She gives them presents. She gives them celebrations, but they're not connecting. She doesn't get them. And of course, the husband, Salo, he's got other things on his mind, and partly because he's carrying a great burden. So we're going to get into the dynamic, the relationship dynamics, what even brings these two people together, Salo and Johanna. What do they each need from the other person? To what degree does this symbiotic relationship, because that's what it is, and then how does it spill over and impact the family dynamic? And then of course there's Phoebe. And you raised a really good question, Jen, about what if Phoebe was one of the triplets? What if there were two girls and a boy and one of the other guys got left behind? You know, how might that have changed the dynamic? So lots of maybe unanswered questions, but lots of interesting questions. Okay. Oh, I love this. A lot of hands.
Yeah, a lot of
Okay.
hands. I think Diane, and then we'll go to Berna, Jill, and Mariana. Go ahead, Diane.
Okay.
You're good. Go ahead. Diane, you hear
Oh,
us?
is it me?
Yeah.
I read it. I realized I read the wrong I read Latecomers by Ross. I didn't realize there were two different books, but I'm still here and I'm listening.
Okay, well, you're here and
Sorry.
maybe this one will spark your interest, but no worries there. So, all right, well, stay tuned. You'll see how, if you like this one. So Berna, go ahead.
Okay, as many of you know, I'm an identical twin, and I dearly love my sibling, so I was annoyed. And I'm also a marriage and family therapist and mental health counselor, and I could not finish the book. I was so annoyed with these parents for their lack of parenting and for their lack of even seeing who these children were and getting some help. They knew they were in deep doo-doo, and they just never got any help for them. And it was, to me, it was like when you're sitting in therapy and the people tell the same story over and over and over, and nobody ever wants to change. And about midway through, I said, I'm just going to go to the end of the book and I've had it. I could not listen to them anymore, and I
Yeah.
would not want to have them in a therapy session. But
Yeah,
because
one of-
it's
yeah.
very, very odd, very rare. I've done a lot of reading about about even not identical twins, about twins and triplets, and they almost inevitably have a bond. And this was just too weird.
Okay, well,
Right. But I came because I love your class, Anna, and I
Thank
would
you.
take it even if I didn't read the book, because I like listening to you.
thank you. Well, one of the things that we see at the end is there really was a bond, but they were so, these children and the parents, we have to start by recognizing they're very selfish. Everybody is all about me, right? Including the mother and father. You're absolutely right, Berna. That they are, I'm going to say they're not great parents, but what the author wants us to think about is why? What is it that's keeping them from being better parents? Forget it. I don't know that anybody's a great parent. We all do our best, but what keeps them from being better parents, right? And I think the one thing is secrets. The other thing is, I don't think there was ever a love relationship, a real mutual love and understanding between Salo and Johanna. I think she needed somebody to take care of, and he needed somebody to take care of him. And when that magic wore off, if it was even magic, I don't think it was magic, it was just need. He was carrying a burden. She was like, okay, poor baby, come on, I'll take care of you. And then, he decided it was way too much. And he goes off looking for a distraction, if you will. And the distraction materializes in the form of art and a relationship. And of course, the relationship is more complicated because she's one of the people in the car who survived. He didn't even remember her. And if we want, we can go so far as to say Stella is also a latecomer, right? She comes late to the relationship. And we'll talk again a little bit more about how she, I think, helps in the same way that Phoebe helps bring this family together, as odd as it may seem to us. So we're going to get into what do we mean by family these days. Okay, we have Jill and Mariana.
Go ahead, Jill.
Hi, I like the book. I did believe that the kids hated each other because I hated my sister for 20 years, and now we're like this. And my two sons hated each other, and now they're like this.
Yeah.
But as far as someone mentioned that they should have gone for counseling, but they didn't send them for counseling. The father should have gone for counseling when he had the accident, and he never did. So if he didn't go to counseling and he was so messed up, it seems pretty obvious that he wouldn't encourage his wife to take the kids. As far as the wife, Joanna, you said she gave them all of these things, these parties, and took the pictures and whatever. That's what she needed. That's not what they
Exactly.
needed.
Exactly.
She wanted this perfect family, and she was doing what she needed to get that, not what they needed. But the point that I wanted to make was when I started reading it, I didn't realize, and then I had to start all over again because I realized I had missed it. Phoebe was the narrator.
Yes.
And I missed that.
Right.
I missed that
Right.
when I first started reading it.
Right.
She was the narrator, and that changed a lot for me when
Yes.
that finally hit me.
And don't feel bad because there's just a tiny clue at the very beginning. And
Right.
I confess, I missed it too on my first read.
Oh, good.
Yeah, don't worry. Because she tells us in the foreword, right? Because you don't know where the story's going. And then I'll just read the last paragraph. Well, actually, I have to read a little more than that because it's so important the way the author sets us up. And Phoebe becomes the surprise, right? Phoebe is that surprise narrator, but she's the thread. She's what brings everybody together, whether we believe it or not. And I'm really glad to hear people sharing that, they didn't really love their siblings growing up. And now that things are better. And also some of you may remember, I have triplets and they're 9, and I have 2 boys and a girl. Not me, triplet grandchildren, right? So, and I watch them, and some days I say after this book, oh, please don't let them be like that. Please don't let them be like that. But it's a typical 9-year-old. Look at me, oh, I did it better than you did. Oh no, it's my turn. Oh, can I go first? I mean, all the typical stuff. Anyway, let me indulge me, if you will. I want to read 2 paragraphs, the very beginning in the foreword. The Oppenheimer triplets, who were thought of by not a single person who knew them as the Oppenheimer triplets, had been in full flight from one another as far back as their ancestral petri dish. Not one of the 3, Harrison, the smart one, Lewin, the weird one, and Sally, the girl, had a speck of genuine affection for either of the others, or had ever once thought of a sister or a brother with anything resembling a bond, let alone as counterparts in a tender and eternal family relationship. And then she goes on to say this in spite of what their mom tried very much over the years to foster. And as someone mentioned, yes, she collects, her memories are in these photographs, right? Everybody's got a collection. One of the themes on this book is people collect different things, whether it's art, whether it's furniture, whether it's junk, or whether it's just memories, right? And encased in these beautiful photographs. But Joanna is like an optics person. She would not do well in the time of Facebook, which she's probably not doing very well in, because, for Joanna, it would be, I saw a cartoon recently in the New Yorker, and I think they were either porcupines or squirrels. And there are 2 frames. And in the first frame, the 2 animals are like, and then in the next frame, it says Facebook. And they're like this, so, what we post on Facebook, those of us who post or don't, is very different many times from the reality. So, but I want to go back to what you were saying, Jill, at the very end of that foreword, she says, and then when they were 18 and not just leaving home, but desperate to begin 3 permanently separate adult lives, which is exactly what would have happened if the Oppenheimer family hadn't taken a turn with a strange and quite possibly unprecedented, but it did. We did. And that has made all the difference. And when you go back and read it and go, we, who's this we? And then you realize for the rest of the novel that Phoebe is telling the story. And what I found fascinating, and to the author's credit, right? So when Phoebe's telling the story, she has an adult awareness, right? You can't be a frozen egg and tell the story of what's going on, even if you had magic glasses, because you've been telling the story from a not a person yet's perspective. So she's telling the story from an adult perspective, but she's 19, they're 19 when she enters the family. So even though she tells us about their childhood and she tells us about everything that happened, she didn't really witness it. But we kind of forget about that. So it's a brilliant stroke on behalf of the author that she chooses to tell the story from Phoebe's perspective. So we'll get more into that. Yes, Mariana.
Yeah, this is the children is something that she wanted very much. She saw that in her family, and she wanted that kind of family for her life. Tell you the truth, when I first started this book, I hated it because during the middle of it, I mean, I have to go with Barbara. I mean, so much selfishness.
Yes.
It was all me.
Right.
Each of them were me. Mother, the father.
Yeah.
The father never got over what happened in the accident. He never even came to terms with it, which is what I thought haunted him throughout his life.
Yes.
But at the end, when I think Phoebe sort of emerges, and I got into it a little more, she definitely is the glue.
Yeah.
And I think in that case, you would look at she needed to be born just to
right,
put some sense into them. Like It was a hard book to get into, particularly the first half. I have to say, a hard book to get into. The
You know,
incredible amount of selfishness. I don't have any brothers and sisters, so I can't talk about,
Okay. You know, the author spoke at length, and we need to address this. The question of why doesn't Salo or the mother, Joanna, or anybody go to therapy? This is a decision that the author makes, right? If the author wanted them to go to therapy, they would have gone to therapy. And if they went to therapy, we probably wouldn't have had a book. So, because all of their problems would have been solved. So what she wants us to think about are these very important questions of today. My parents, and maybe your parents and grandparents, they didn't have these issues. What do we do if we have 7 frozen eggs, but we don't want to have 7 children right now? That was not a problem 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So these are today problems. And also there's this notion of randomness, right? That you were talking about, Jen. How do you feel how does Phoebe feel? It's like, whoa, those 3 got to live for 19 years, even though we're all the same age, right? We were conceived at that same moment, but they get an extra 19 years with this family. And in this case, you might be saying, well, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe you missed out on 19 years of, and now you're coming in and you are going to kind of make this better. And so does she feel gypped, or does she feel blessed that she missed out on those 19 years? And again, that's for us to determine. So one's birth order, even with my triplets, they still, even though they're 1 minute apart, they still say, I'm the oldest, I'm the middle, I'm the baby. That's how they do it. And whenever there's any kind of giving out of anything, goodies, I should go first because I'm the oldest, oh no, I should get it because I'm the baby. Oh no, I should get it, I'm in the middle and I'm the girl. So everybody's got a story, right? Everybody's got an excuse. But I think that multiples aside, just general family birth order, right? You think about where you are in the family dynamic, whether you are an only child, whether you are the oldest, whether there's a great gap, as there was in my parents' families, right? Both my mother and my father, they had many children in their family, and the oldest child often had at least a 10-year difference between, the oldest person and the baby. And so how does that inform the path that we take and the way that we deal with relationships? I think those are important questions that the author wants us to think about. Okay, let me make sure. Do we have any other hands up? Any
No.
questions? No? Okay. So then the author wants us to consider, I think, a lot of these themes. We talked about, family relationships. We talked about sibling rivalry, but we didn't really talk about secrets, right? There were secrets. Okay, do we have something in the chat? Something just came in on the chat. I learned gypped is a derogatory word. I've tried to shift to using the word cheated instead. Oh, thank you. I didn't know that. I did not like the book, and we had ancient. Okay. So let me go back to this. In terms of secrets, right? Everybody's got some secrets, and we use the word selfish. I know that we certainly could apply that word, I think, to every one of these characters, parents and children alike. And the secrets that they keep really impact the relationship. I mean, how are we feeling about the fact that the parents decide not to share with their children what is the burden that that Salo is dealing with? The fact that they were in a car accident, 2 of his friends died. I don't know. Is that something you feel should have been revealed? Yes, no, why does the author, well, we know why the author does it because we want to have the tension, but in terms of secret keeping and what is the right thing to do, how would you have handled that? Let's hear some, how that struck you. Anybody? Yes, Mariana?
Well, I think since it haunted him so much, which it did, he turned to art. He turned to more or less inward for what, almost 10, at least 10 years without his friend, his girlfriend, and it haunted him. So he needed to talk about it.
Right.
He needed to express that part, even to his wife, but he didn't. It's like, I think they were not a demonstrative couple. And they weren't very talkative to their children. They did the superficial things, the pretty dresses, the party,
Right.
you know, it all, if you got a photo album, there they would be perfect. The picture here, and you would think, yeah, their life is good, it's great.
Right.
But no, he did not talk about it, and he needed to. I think if he had done that, he would have gotten more out of it. He would have been able to relieve his burden a little bit. And I think they would have sort of knew where each of them was coming from.
You know, I agree, but then again, I think that the author deliberately doesn't, allow him to do that so that we have this backstory. So we have an explanation. And I also found it interesting that Johanna, she takes it, right? But she's only going to take it so far. She decides, okay, buddy, we're going to have a little arrangement. You're going to have an affair. I'm going to have a baby. Sign here. And he doesn't really have a choice. So there are two passages that I'd like to share. Go ahead, Jill.
Yeah, Jill, you're on mute.
No, Jill.
Hold on.
I
Yeah.
think Sally should have told a therapist, but not his children. Maybe I'm from an older generation that you don't tell so much to your children, you protect them. But one of the things I think struck me with this whole thing was their relationship was for all the wrong reasons. He felt guilt about the accident and guilt also that he really didn't love her.
Right.
I forgot her name, the one who
Joanna.
died.
Oh,
No.
His fiance, almost fiance.
Yeah, who he really didn't feel he really loved,
Right.
but he felt if he made like he loved her, or that would make him feel less guilty. But then also Joanna wanted to marry him because she was so enthralled by the fact that his beautiful fiance is somebody she could take over for
Right.
and cure him. I mean,
Right.
they both really, and he didn't really love Joanna either. I mean, everybody got together for the wrong reason. So, I mean, this family didn't stand a chance of being emotionally healthy.
Right. And it is interesting that it's the latecomer that brings them together, and the latecomer who sadly is a pawn at the very beginning, right? Johanna is using her as a pawn, if you will. I think the way that it was written, and again, I don't know if you agree with me, but in a book that was in so many ways sad, there were times that I was laughing out loud because there are some sentences there are some passages that in her writing, it's just funny. Not the situation, just the presentation of the situation. And here's one example. Let's see. Okay, so this is the thinking of Johanna. She thought of the babies her tall and sullen teenagers had once been, default dependent, wild for her attention. She thought of the years she had been charged with the important work of keeping them alive and safe, years in which no one, herself included, had ever once questioned her purpose or her worth. She thought of the wet, toothless smiles, the little arms enfolding her neck and squeezing tight, the reading of bedtime stories, the planning of activities, the listening to scales, blah, 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 blah. And then she thought of how her husband sometimes referred to their family, or at least to himself and the children, as the last of the Oppenheimers, as if he were solely authorized to make that pronouncement, as if he had been the one longing them into existence and presiding almost entirely over their daily lives, and being the parent who was actually there and not communing with modern art in some warehouse in Coney Island or Sheepshead Bay. As if she had not faithfully paid this very bill once every year since 1981 for a purpose she had never really understood, or at least not until now. Dr. Lorenz Prichard was still in the same office suite on Fifth Avenue. He welcomed her back, asked for a photograph of the kids, and listened to her explain why she had come in. He did her the courtesy of not looking surprised, or even once asking, "Are you absolutely certain?" Yes, it was possible, he told her, very possible, though this time there would have to be a gestational carrier. Only one outright miracle per family, that was his rule. She would be okay with a gestational carrier, he assumed. The Johanna Oppenheimer in his consulting room was a far cry from the Johanna Oppenheimer of 2 decades earlier. Yes, she was perfectly okay with a gestational carrier. The following morning, our mother, and here's that little clue again, it's our mother, so now we know that Phoebe's telling the story. The following morning, our mother made the unprecedented request that Sallow stay home from work. She told him what she knew, and then she told him what she wanted. She also had forms from the gestational surrogacy agency ready for his signature, and he signed them. Of course he did. And that was how the person who really could be called the last of the Oppenheimers, her hour come round at last, began slouching towards Brooklyn Heights to be born. And those of you who are familiar with the poem Slouching Towards Bethlehem, this is like a joke, and the very serious thing, slouching toward Bethlehem, and here we go. This is not the savior, but in some ways she is the savior who is slouching towards Bethlehem and the miracle child. And then what makes it even funnier is the announcement. And again, it's not ha-ha funny, but it's 2023 kind of interesting, if not funny. This is the birth announcement. Johanna and Solomon Oppenheimer, with Harrison, Lewin, and Sally Oppenheimer, not really, joyfully announce the birth of Phoebe Elizabeth Oppenheimer, June 20th, 2000, 8 pounds, 2 ounces, 22 inches. Thanks to our wonderful team at the office of Dr. Lorenz Prichard, and of course, to our fabulous gestational carrier, Tammy Sue Blanding. Okay, only today. Those are not the kind of announcements we sent out 20, 30 years ago. Okay, I think I saw some hands up. While I was reading, was there a hand up? No?
Anyone?
Okay,
No.
so back to your point, Jill, you're absolutely right. These people, starting with Salo and Johanna, they were drawn for the wrong reasons. As I said earlier, he needed somebody to take care of him, to make everything okay. She needed somebody to take care of and I could replace this other beauty and, woohoo, I could be the one. And now, remember that word that I read, her purpose is gone. These kids are going off to college. And she certainly knows that if they're going to be absent, her husband has already been absent, right? Even though he comes home occasionally, his heart and his soul and his mind and his body are very often in Sheepshead Bay or Coney Island, and with the art or with Stella. And so she doesn't just roll over and play dead. She doesn't say, okay. She says, I have an idea and I'm going to blackmail you. And that's basically what she does. Now, what is interesting, the other part that you mentioned, that we mentioned before about what she gives to her family, and I think it was Jill who said, she's not really connecting with them. She gives what she thinks they need, but she gives what she needs, right? She needs to have the optics. She needs to have the birthday parties. And here's what the author writes. Let's see. Johanna was a collector of moments. Lewin knew that. Sally favored a green t-shirt, then she must have an Emerald City themed party. Harrison went through a pretentious bow tie phase. Well, off he went with Salo on a father-son trip to Savile Row to have matching three-piece suits made. Where was an 8-year-old supposed to wear a three-piece suit? Plus, he outgrew it in a matter of months. Our mother, as long as Lewin could remember, had hoarded, there's an operative word there, right? Had hoarded and imbued with great significance such tiny moments, all the while seeing so little of who her 3 children actually were, and even less as they each learned to deflect her oversight. Johanna had been happiest when they were small, all 3 dependent on her and competing for her attention. He wondered if the baby had made her happy again, but he suspected not. He suspected our mother was slipping down a long and rough decline, grabbing as she went and very possibly calling for help. Okay, so we really get, I think we get to know who she is and what makes her thrive. But as I said, to her credit, she doesn't roll over and play dead. And also to her credit, when Salo is gone, as he needs to be, right? In order for this family, I think this is what the author is saying, in order for this family to move ahead, Salo and his very selfish desires and needs, he needs to be gone. And in the end, they all come together, most especially Phoebe and her mother, as they're sitting at the end after the wedding, and they, for the first time, are able to talk. Not so much Phoebe. Phoebe's able to connect with everybody, but for the first time, Johanna is able to treat her children as adults with their own lives that she doesn't need to micromanage. So back to you for some comments or questions. Is this making any more sense? Is it becoming more confusing? Do we know where the author's going? Any hands or questions? No? Okay. So this thing about secrets. So we know what Salo's secret is, and we know that the mother is keeping it as well. We have main characters and minor characters who also have secrets. We talked, you mentioned Barbara, Eli, and he certainly has a secret. And I think that if we were living at another time, we might see his storyline as you said, also unbelievable. But I don't think we have to go too far if we're thinking of New York politics, where people just make up who they want to be. And without mentioning any names, you can say, oh, I went to this school. Oh, and my parents such and such. So you know what? You can create your own identity, and there are enough tools out there that a story could be promoted, and those people who want to buy it do, and those people who want to question it, do, and those people who want to say, you're out of your mind and dismiss it, do. So I did find it totally believable, and that he could be making up an entire different identity. What I found less believable, although I get it, and this is why Harrison becomes humanized, right, a little bit, because we learned that even he could be fooled. Even he who looks down at everybody, he's better than everybody. Not only is he better than his siblings, he's better than his parents, he's better than his teachers, he's better than everybody. He knows best. And so, we've had enough of him, right? And it's not until the very, very end when, there's that one scene, and it is pivotal in the novel. And that is when everybody is hurt, right? These siblings are so nasty to each other and to their parents, and everyone's secret is exposed. Everyone is stabbed where it hurts him or her the most. And I'm going to ask you to indulge me in reading this scene, because it is so expertly crafted. When you hear the language that the author is using, I don't know about you, but I felt like I was at that party, and that party starts going bad real fast. And it's supposed to be, the mother thinks, woohoo, here we are, I have everybody here. And Sally is up to no good because she's invited Rochelle, and Harrison definitely doesn't want to be there. Nobody wants to be there. And if you just kind of listen to the different, the conversation between them, it's so real, even though it's upsetting. So here we go. So this is, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this is when Sally is outed, right? She's outed by her brother. And let's see. Let's see where we go. Rochelle has just come in. And there's that thing. All right, here we go. Goodbye, Sally, said Rochelle Steiner, and she plowed on past her short legs, nobly struggling through the deep sand. Wait, Lewin rushed after her. I need to. Rochelle didn't even turn. Away she went up the log steps to the house, with Lewin flailing after her. Most entertaining, Harrison said brightly after a moment. Of course, he's reveling in, anybody who's hurt. You are such an asshole, Sally exploded. Sally, our mother said pointlessly. How could you say that, she howled. Say what? You don't have to be ashamed, Sally. It's 2001. Nobody cares. I care, she wanted to say. I wasn't ready, she wanted to say. I didn't know, was what she really wanted to say, but not to him. That would only make it worse. It's none of your fucking business. Anyway, never mind. I'm leaving in the morning, and I hope you have a lovely life. Go play with the white supremacists in Virginia, but stay away from me. You don't know the first thing about what I'm doing, Harrison said. You have no concept of what's going on in this country. Very likely, Sally said, but I have a super clear concept of what's happening right here, and I never want to see you again. Oh, Sally, Johanna said. She was crying, Phoebe in her arms also crying, but likely not for the same reason. Please don't say that, he's your brother. He came out of a petri dish, she howled, and so did I, and so did that. She flung out her hand toward Phoebe, propelling a handful of sand that fortunately did not reach either parent or child. I don't think that constitutes a bond. I never did. Don't talk to your mother like that, said Sallow, who had stepped closer to Johanna. Oh, for Christ's sake, said Sally. as if you have any authority here. Oh, I beg your pardon, our father said, more angry than she had ever seen him. Sally hauled herself up, dripping sand. Then she stepped close to him and said very quietly, please tell me you don't think I'm that stupid. You are a terrible father, and I have known for years. What did you say? Johanna said. What did she say? Harrison asked. Sallow, the only one who knew exactly what she had said nothing. And for a long, excruciating moment, no one moved or spoke again. Right, Sally said at last. I think that's everything. I'm done. I'm out. Sally, don't leave, our mother cried. Been nice knowing you, said Harrison with glee. And Sally wanted to tell him what an appalling person he was, but someone had blocked her exit, and he did it first. Harrison, said Lewin from the bottom of the log steps. He looked terrible, deflated, obviously devastated, but somehow not yet through with either of them. That was a horrible thing to do. Remember, Harrison's the one who outed her. Oh, please, you don't need any help from me fucking up your life, either of you. I meant about Sally, what you did. Why did you have to tell everyone that? Why did you have to tell me, Lewin? Harrison said cruelly. I shouldn't have, he said. No, you shouldn't have, said Sally. In case you want to put this all on him, he's a cruel bastard and he's always been one, but I might have expected more from you. Or is this radical truth some part of your religious conversion? Lewin turned to her. Because you're not the only one Rochelle confided in, you know. I mean, you could not have picked a less asinine thing to want than to be a Mormon? Whoa, said Harrison. That shit actually rubbed off on you from the roommate? What are you saying? It was Sallow. Now, again, we're almost at the end, but this is so real. The language, the way they interrupt each other, what they're saying. And now comes the real climax of the novel. And this is the turning point, and that's why it's so important. So one more minute. What are you saying? It was Sallow. He hadn't moved or said a word since Sally had leaned close to him and spoken. What does he mean you want to be a Mormon? And when his son said nothing, he looked at them all, one by one by one. The weeping wife and the toddler, the trio of flailing young adults. Not one of them would ever know what he was thinking, though much time would be spent and considerable pain derived from wondering. They went back inside, the triplets into their bedrooms, where they commenced not speaking to one another, and it was nearly silent on the upstairs floor of the cottage, apart from the whimpering Phoebe Oppenheimer, who was nobody's immediate priority, and the hushed scene unfolding in Sallow Oppenheimer's office as a marriage of 25 years jolted to its end. For the record, he did apologize. He said that our mother had not deserved this. He said that she would have whatever she needed for the rest of her life, and the kids too. It wasn't like that. In fact, he honored her and every one of her choices, every one. But he had an early flight, 6:20 from the Vineyard to Boston, 7:45 from Boston to Lax. Outside on the beach, the caterers, look at these details here. Outside on the beach, the caterers waited for nearly an hour after the last Oppenheimer had departed and failed to return. Then they began packing all the food into plastic tubs. Joanna, who would remain for hours in Salo's office, long after her husband had gone to bed, could hear them downstairs in the kitchen. And for years, she would associate those sounds, the suck of the sub-zero door being dragged open, the smack of its closing, with the worst night of her life, itself a mere prologue to the worst day. A cab picked him up early, and the only person he might possibly have said goodbye to was the only one who was awake. Again, it's Phoebe, I've always been an early riser, and I have believed in that, in the thought of him in my doorway, holding his bag and looking down at me with love for my entire life. But the truth is, I can't take up a single shard of real memory, not of him and not of what happened afterward. In the morning, all three of my siblings would also try to leave, but only Sally was out early enough to make it off the island. She caught the last ferry before they shut it down and disembarked into Woods Hole, into a new world, by which time our father was dust over lower Manhattan. Okay, thank you for indulging me, but those 4 pages were so essential to what happened before and after. And if we didn't understand that horrible scene, I don't think we would believe that there could be a reconciling. For me, this was the moment that everyone was really, really hurt. The father was told by his daughter, you think you've had that secret? And she's not talking about the murder, she's talking about the affair. I know you've been doing this. You're a terrible father. Her sexuality is, she's outed, and she's not ready to tell them. Not that she didn't want to, but she said, I didn't even know if she wasn't sure. So why tell these 2 brothers who have not shown any kind of love and connection? She's not sure how they're going to respond. Lewin, of course, loses the girlfriend, and that was a whole big secret. As I said, everybody's got secrets, right? He doesn't tell her that he's got a sister at the same school. She doesn't tell her that she's got a brother at the same school. I mean, everybody's hiding. And Harrison is exposed as this creepy guy. There's nothing nice about him. And it's clear that where maybe Sally had a little bit of respect for Lewin, she had only animosity toward Harrison and her father. And then poor Phoebe, well, poor Johanna too. Again, those details of that sub-zero refrigerator. One of the messages here is, this is not a poor family. This is a family who's got enough money, lots of money, enough that Salo could walk away and still say to everybody, you never have to worry about money ever again. I'm going to take care of everybody. That's not what they needed. That's not what they wanted. And so what the author does is she explodes the myth of, money is, well, we know money could be the root of all evil, but money can't buy you happiness. We know that too. And this is what she's trying to show us here. And everybody seems to be searching, right? Lewin is searching for, he is envious of his roommate, because his roommate, and it's not so much that it's, the Mormon religion itself, it's that the roommate has roots. The roommate has something to believe in. It could have been any religion, but the author said she chose Mormons because she's obsessed with Mormons. And she said that when her mother read the manuscript, her mother said to her, enough with the Mormons. I think you should get rid of that part of the book. And she said, no, I really like it. So she said, I'm leaving it in there. And I will tell you, this is my interpretation. I don't know if this is true, but I do know that this is going to be turned into a TV series. And some of the subplots that we might think are not necessary, I think if you're thinking in terms of a writer who's been, whose work has gone from the page to the stage, so to speak, she knows what she's doing, because this will make it a longer series. We're going to have a side chapter about the Mormons. We're going to have a side chapter about the art. We're going to have a side chapter about being a hoarder, a side chapter about Shaker furniture, because she says she loves Shaker furniture. So everything she wanted to include in this book, she kind of gives to the different siblings or the father as their obsession. Anyway, I forgot what I was saying. Where were we going with this? Oh, the end. So this scene is really pivotal. Everybody is exposed, everybody's secrets are exposed, everybody's Achilles heel, right? Whatever it is that's hurting them, the siblings go right for it, they go for the jugular. And then after this, okay, now they have to find their way back. If you paid attention to the epigraph, which is from Evelyn Waugh, it reads, I caught him with an unseen hook and an invisible line, which is long enough to let him wander to the ends of the world and still bring him back with a twitch upon the thread. That's a beautiful line, right? You give someone enough room to go off, find, explore, succeed, fail, but where there was just a little bit, enough just to go like this and reel back that person. And, to Phoebe's credit, she's able to kind of bring them all together at the end. And I also want to give Stella credit, right? I mentioned her before. I see her also as another latecomer. She is a latecomer in Salo's life, and she's a latecomer to the Oppenheimer blended family because she's got the son, and he is embraced for the most part by the now 19-year-old siblings. And when Lewin is going to get married, the brother is going to be there, the half brother is going to be there, and Stella is also invited. And she says, no, I think it's enough for your mom that my son will be there. I think I'm going to take a pass on this. And, so we see it's not even the second half, it's like the second third of the book. I just finished where I read about that pivotal scene is like 319. So we have about 100 pages left. So it's 2/3 into the book where we have this explosion. And then the rest 100 pages are dedicated to how the mending, how the healing starts to take place. So I bought it. I bought it maybe because I wanted to buy it. I wanted this family to finally get together. And I like second chances. I think that Johanna recognizes that I've gone about this all wrong. And she said did someone say therapy before, right? She comes to the conclusion in the end that that's what she needs, that she's going to speak to a professional. And, of course, Phoebe is definitely, in with that. She's very pleased that her mother is going to seek some help. And so is the rest of the family. So I don't know. Did you buy the ending? Were you annoyed, Barbara? Does it make any more sense now? I know you didn't like it in the beginning, but could you buy into it a little more?
If you want to unmute, hang on.
Yeah, I guess so. A lot of the things that you're talking about brought that back into my mind, and she does lose a lot of convincing details to make it realistic.
Okay, good. Again, I don't think that this is a perfect novel. I think it could have been better edited. But I found it interesting because these are people we don't like. But I was curious to know how it was going to end. And so I kept going back to find out what are they going to do? Are they going to kill each other? So it was nice that the path brings them to a place of peace and reunion. And if I had to bet, I would bet that they're all going to get together for Thanksgiving. Stella too. I do. I think that there's enough there now. They have become a blended enough family. They've seen each other's worst sides. Even Harrison kind of jokes with Ephraim, and in terms of what school he's going to go to. And interestingly enough, Phoebe is going to go to the same school that Harrison went to, and they kind of come literally full circle at the end, and they have their big cookout. And right after that, let's see, Johanna hired Lobster Tails to come and cater the rehearsal dinner on the 10th, which was also the triplets' birthday, though she did acknowledge certain humiliating associations with the plan. In fact, the proprietors of Lobster Tails, that's the catering company, had not forgotten the family debacle of 17 years earlier. But they were professionals, and besides, they did the best clam bakes on the island. That was just a fact. The following morning, Lewin and Rochelle were married near the still warm ashes by a rabbi from the Hebrew Center of Vineyard Haven, and the anniversary of Salo's death became, as well, the anniversary of his son Lewin's great ongoing happiness. So life goes. Some of them left quickly after that. Paula had classes starting at Cornell, and Rochelle had a trial beginning later in the week, and Ephraim, new in his job and frantic to maintain a good impression, rushed back to the Times. The rest of us, all three of the Oppenheimer triplets, and our mother, and myself, of course, remained. There was another dinner on the back porch, too many leftover lobsters, too many ears of corn, and a day in Edgartown, laying in a year's supply of PG tips and procuring a pair of heavy work boots, which Harrison insisted I would need. Wow, Harrison's paying attention. You're going to need these boots. Let's make sure you have them. The next morning, still together, and it's almost like she's saying it in disbelief, like, wow, we were still together. We departed to the ferry. We departed to the ferry and the mainland, and north to the parking lot of an old diner in Concord, New Hampshire, where the last of the Oppenheimers met her bus and held her family, most of her family, close, and then let them go. And so it's a lovely ending. And the fact that they are all together, they go to the diner, it's reminiscent of better days. And so I think that, we're asked to believe that the bonds were there, but it's all about what Phoebe thinks. I think that is the seminal question. Susan, did you have your hand up? No? Okay. Anybody? Any questions? Still have a lot of friends here. Okay. Anybody else?
See.
Let's see. Okay. Okay. One of the themes that I mentioned, and maybe is worth again focusing on, is this notion of collecting, or we can call it hoarding, right? As we said, Salo collects art. Johanna collects memories. Sally collects furniture. But it's Sally's hoarding or collecting that's interesting, because what she does is a very fine analogy or symbol or metaphor for the way you take the old and you strip it away, right? You strip away, let's say you take this old piece of furniture, you strip away that veneer, you get it down to its original value, not that it's been varnished over with some paint or even decorated, but take it down to the solid wood, and then repurposing it, right? Saying, okay, this is not junk. This is worth saving. This is worth putting to good use again. And that's the symbolism of the furniture, but that's kind of what happens to the family, right? We strip them down to their core, to the bare wood, and there's something good, something solid under there that makes for, repurposing the family, a reunion where they can all come together. So I thought that was, well woven into the whole thing. The other theme is the interest that Stella has with outsider art. And she is very much interested in the art of Henry Darger. And the focus of his work is this, if you remember, because these are details now, but the focus of Henry Darger's work, he was from 1892 to 1973. It was all about the struggle between evil and innocence. And I think that, again, that's a theme that the author subtly weaves into this thing. And maybe it's not evil, it's just selfishness, perhaps, greediness, being self-centered, and being innocent. So the good and evil component. And also, what does it mean to be the outsider? Because in Phoebe's perspective, from Phoebe's perspective, she is the outsider, but she is also the one who slouches towards Bethlehem/Brooklyn and saves the family. So again, the author, her work is a little deeper than it may seem on the surface. And so I thought that was really good. And there's one more thing, and then I'll be quiet. I think it's time. The Shaker furniture, right? Whereas Darger's Darger's work was the struggle of good and evil. The Shaker furniture, the philosophy behind Shaker furniture is always about simplicity and utility, and the honesty, the integrity of the furniture. Those of you who are familiar with Shaker furniture, it's not embellished, right? It's not painted. It's really back to what we said, what I said a little while ago. Its strength lies in its authenticity, right? There's nothing fake about it. There's nothing varnished that makes it anything but simple and honest and strong. And again, those are the messages that the author is weaving in to her story. And I see that I think some people are leaving. How are we doing on time?
We're good. We're
Yeah.
just about the end. Yeah.
Okay. So do we have any other questions or comments? Is there something I left out that you would like explained, or is there somebody we didn't talk about? I'm looking at my notes. I think I've covered most of it.
Jen and Barbara, go ahead.
Oh, yes. Hi, Jen.
You said it was going to be a show. Is it like going to be on Netflix? Is it?
It's going to be on TV series, a mini series on TV.
When is it coming out?
I'm not sure. I don't, it's just in the beginning stages now, because some of you know her other book, The Plot, and she's got 2 series already on TV, and I can't find my notes, but is anybody following her? It's a one-word, Unknown or something like that. I don't have it in front of me, but anyway, it's going to be a mini series on TV. We'll know
Okay.
soon enough, I'm sure.
Okay. And Barbara, and then I see Mariana. Go ahead, Barbara.
I just wanted to know what happened to Eli Stone. He was kind of dropped at the
Yeah,
end. Once you find out he had changed his color, and I thought
Right.
that was a little strange.
Well-
But what happens to him?
I think what happens is, because he is dropped, you're right. But I think it's the humiliation that Harrison suffers in being blind to this, that kind of, that's his Achilles heel. Because he's like, oh, I'm so smart. And he's been duped by somebody who is a fraud. And when we're talking about all these themes of authenticity and being real, he's a fake. And in terms of who he is actually modeled on a real person who had the similar journey that he did. And the person is Jedediah Purdy. And so if you looked him up, you would follow a similar story. People who changed identities, what's his name? Philip Roth. Those of you who maybe are familiar with The Human Stain, his novel, The Human Stain, talks about a professor who does something that's parallel to what Stone is doing. So it's not so unheard of. Okay, Mariana.
Yeah, I believe there's a young lady who also actually did this same thing with the NAACP. She posed as a Black person and she was not. That happens rarely.
Yeah,
But-
I think it's not as unusual as we think.
Yeah.
Thank you. Eileen?
If you want to unmute, Eileen. Hold on.
When you were talking about secrets, I think Rochelle had one of the biggest secrets of all.
Oh, yes, yes,
With her mother being such a hoarder,
yes.
her roommate Sally comes to visit her, and
Right.
she can't even invite her into the house
Right.
because it was such a horrible secret that she was keeping from her roommate.
Right.
And
So
another
everybody's
thing,
keeping.
yeah, and another thing was the lesson that Phoebe talks about at the end. She says that she helped solve all the problems for the family and bring them all together. But the lesson that she learned from her mother was that you put your own oxygen mask on first.
That's right. That's right.
So I think Phoebe decided that she has to now think of herself first and go to college and
That's
take care of her own life now that she solved everybody else's issues.
Right. And remember what I said at that pivotal moment, and that was about halfway through. Johanna does not roll over and play dead. She's like, okay, have I got a deal for you? I'm gonna make you an offer you can't refuse. And the way that she wrote that, if you remember when I read it, she had the papers ready for him to sign, and he signed them. And the next line is, of course he did. He didn't
Right.
really have much of an option.
Right.
So, it's her tone that I love, because it's a lot of wink, wink and a lot of sarcasm. So she's a very good storyteller. And we'll, when the TV series comes on, we'll be comparing notes and wondering whether or not they do a good enough job to do it justice.
And you're an excellent facilitator. We all come back to listen to you, whether
Thank
we
you.
like the book or not. We're going to
Thank
be
you.
here for you.
Thank you, and I love having you. I'm thrilled. We had so many people here today. This is great. And so, shall we
Yeah.
go ahead and announce?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So our next meeting is on
It's
April 17th, right? April
Yes.
17th. And we are going to do a book that came in very close, and by popular demand, it got a little lost in the cracks, but it's a fabulous book, Honor, by Thriti Umrigar. I know I see some of you are already nodding with approval. It is an excellent, excellent book. It takes place in modern day India, and it is, as the title suggests, but in a very subversive way, it is about an honor killing, which is a practice that is still going on in India, where if a young girl, only girls, if a young woman is to bring shame upon her family by stepping out with a young man, then it is up to her family, her brothers in particular, the male members of her family, to exact what they feel is justified honor killing. All right. Now, the practice may seem strange to us, but because the story is told both from a present and earlier perspective. There is a great deal to discuss about the role of women and the consequences that young women in India face, even if they go out to work. All right, their destiny is to stay within the walls of their family home, marry, and then go and stay within the walls of their husband's family home. Of course, it goes without saying that they can only marry the right person. And
Will you
so-
send us the author's name?
Yes, I will. I'll say it now and I'll spell it. I'm sure you'll get an email.
Oh,
From
wait a
Nicole,
minute.
but it is, the name of the book is Honor, Honor. And the author, you may remember her from The Space Between Us. Okay, there it is, and in the chat box, Thriti Umrigar. And she wrote The Space Between Us back in 2006. Some of you may remember her. And also The Secrets We Keep. And up until this time in her professional life, the author has written about the class system, but she's never addressed the issue of violence. And she has decided she can no longer escape that issue. So it is a central part of this work. So, yes, Jill?
Actually, tomorrow night, I'm listening to
Yes,
a
me too.
Zoom from the Glen Cove Library.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, from the author. Yeah.
Yes. And I don't know if there's still room. There might be. I'm not sure. I signed up quite a while ago. But if you have time and you want to research that, she will be speaking tomorrow at the Glen Cove Library. However,
At 7:00.
right. But don't worry. You know what? You could Google her at any time. And she's given many interviews. So if you have time and you want to hear what she has to say, just put her name in the Google box